I identified my brother's body in 1998. 28 years later, he called me. At least that's what I believed. The call came at exactly 9:17 on a Tuesday night. The number wasn't saved in my phone. No name, no location, just a string of digits I didn't recognize. When I answered, nobody spoke. I heard breathing, slow, calm, almost like the caller was waiting for me to recognize him. Then a voice finally said one word. Daniel. My blood turned cold. Nobody called me Daniel anymore. Everyone called me Dan, everyone except my older brother, Michael. And Michael had been buried 28 years ago. I know because I identified his body myself. I remember the cold room, the police officer beside me, the white sheet, the funeral, the coffin lowering into the ground. I spent nearly 3 decades believing that chapter of my life had ended. Then the voice spoke again. You still keep the key. The world seemed to stop. When we were children, Michael and I buried a brass key beneath an oak tree behind our grandfather's farm. Nobody knew, not our parents, not our friends, nobody. Then the caller said 4 words. Dig it up, Daniel. The line went dead. The next morning, I drove to the abandoned farm. The oak tree still stood where it always had. After almost an hour of digging, I found something. But it wasn't the key. It was a rusted metal box. Inside sat a cassette tape, a photograph, and a folded note. The photograph showed Michael, only it couldn't have been Michael. The picture looked too recent. Written on the back were 4 words. I was never Michael. My hands started shaking. I rushed home and played the cassette. Static filled the room, then a man's voice emerged. Daniel, if you're hearing this, then the call worked. The voice sounded older, exhausted, afraid. Then he said something impossible. I'm not your brother. I replayed the sentence again and again. The recording claimed my father had secretly worked for a network that created new identities for protected witnesses. Names changed. Records altered, lives erased. Then came the warning. Don't trust the death certificate. That sentence consumed me. Weeks later, after countless requests and phone calls, I obtained the original case file. The fingerprints were missing. Entire sections had been removed. The dental records didn't belong to Michael. In fact, they didn't belong to the body at all. For 28 years, everyone believed Michael was buried in that grave. But the evidence suggested something terrifying. Nobody had ever actually proven it. Then another package arrived, no return address. Inside was a newer photograph, the same man from before, older now, gray-haired. Attached was a note. Look at his left hand. I zoomed in. The man had 6 fingers, Michael didn't. The realization hit me instantly. The caller wasn't Michael. The photographs weren't Michael. The entire mystery pointed somewhere else. Most people would have stopped there. I couldn't. Something still felt wrong. So I returned to my father's abandoned house. After hours of searching, I discovered a hidden compartment beneath the garage floor. Inside sat a waterproof case, passports, identity records, old photographs, and an envelope with my name written across the front. Daniel. Inside was a letter dated March 1998, several months before Michael supposedly died. The first sentence nearly stopped my heart. If you are reading this, then I failed. The letter explained that Michael had uncovered information about stolen identities. People had disappeared. Records had been rewritten. Entire lives had been replaced. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Michael was never the target. I kept reading. The target was me. According to my father, I wasn't his biological son. I had been placed with our family under another identity when I was 4 years old. Even Michael hadn't learned the truth until 1998. The final page contained a birth certificate. The name wasn't Daniel. It belonged to someone I had never heard of. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. Then I noticed something else. A VHS tape hidden beneath the documents. When I finally played it, my stomach dropped. The recording showed my father, older, terrified, sleep-deprived. He looked directly into the camera, then said, "Michael, if you're watching this, don't come back." The tape wasn't for me, it was for him. Which meant my father believed Michael was alive. The video ended with coordinates. 3 days later, I drove to an abandoned train station. The place looked deserted. Broken windows, rust-covered tracks, silence. Then I found a small metal box hidden beneath a bench. Inside was a recent photograph. And for the first time in 28 years, I saw Michael, older, gray-haired, but unmistakably Michael. Written on the back were 6 words. "You were never supposed to find this." My hands trembled. For years I thought Michael disappeared to save himself. Now I understood. He disappeared to protect me. Then I noticed something hidden inside the photograph frame. A tiny memory card. I almost missed it. The files contained hundreds of photographs, pictures of me at school, at work, at my wedding, at my father's funeral. Someone had watched me for decades. Then I noticed something terrifying. In several photographs, the same unknown man appeared in the background, a man wearing a dark coat. At first, I assumed it was coincidence. Then I saw him again, and again, and again, 23 different photographs, 23 appearances. Always watching, never facing the camera directly. The oldest image was dated 2001. Whoever he was, he'd been following me for years. Then I found a video file. The timestamp showed it had been recorded only 48 hours earlier. I pressed play. The screen remained black, then a familiar voice spoke. Michael's voice, older, weak, but unmistakable. "If you're seeing this, I ran out of time." For the first time, I knew Michael had survived. Then he said something unexpected. "I lied about one thing," my heart pounded. "The secret was never your identity." Everything inside me froze. Then Michael said, "Daniel, you're not the hidden child." Silence. Then, "I am." The video ended. No explanation, no answers, nothing. I sat there staring at the screen. Then I noticed something strange. The file wasn't 48 hours old. It couldn't be. The metadata showed it had been created 12 years earlier, but modified 2 days ago. Someone had accessed it recently. Someone besides Michael, someone who knew where the memory card would end up. That realization led to another discovery. Buried inside the card was an encrypted folder. It took weeks to unlock. Inside were surveillance reports, medical records, financial transactions, and one photograph that changed everything. The picture showed Michael standing beside my father. The date stamp read 2007, 9 years after Michael supposedly died. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the third person in the photograph, me. Standing between them, smiling, my stomach dropped. I had no memory of that day. None. I checked the date repeatedly. The image was authentic, which meant one of 2 things. Either the photograph was fake, or I had met Michael years after his supposed death and somehow forgotten it. Then came the final twist. Attached to the photograph was a handwritten note from my father. Only one sentence. "Memory is easier to erase than identity." I felt sick. Suddenly, dozens of strange moments from my life resurfaced. Unexplained headaches, missing weekends, events family members remembered that I didn't. Had someone altered my memories? Had I known the truth before? Then I opened the final file, an audio recording. The voice wasn't Michael's, it wasn't my father's, it was mine. The recording began with a date, August 14, 2007. Then I heard myself say something that shattered everything. "If you're hearing this, it means the memory procedure worked." I couldn't breathe. The voice continued. "I asked them to erase what happened. It was the only way to keep Michael hidden." I sat frozen, listening to my own voice confess to a decision I couldn't remember making. Then the recording ended with a final sentence. A sentence that changed the entire story. Michael isn't hiding from them. Pause. He's hiding from me. The recording ended just like that. For 28 years, I thought I was searching for my dead brother. Then I thought I was uncovering a conspiracy. Then I believed Michael was protecting me. Now I wasn't sure of anything, because the final clue suggested a terrifying possibility. Maybe Michael never disappeared. Maybe he never stopped running. And maybe the person he feared most was me.